I really thought we were doing a show about building cars and motorcycles for people. It evolved into a show about people and their stories, and the cars and the motorcycles became supporting characters for these people's stories.
For many years, Danny, the Count Koker, dazzled America with a wrench in one hand and a microphone in another. But the truth he hid behind that king of cool image will leave you speechless. Behind the scenes, Danny wasn't just managing a shop, he was holding a whole empire together, fighting off embezzlement claims and keeping the Count's franchise alive. But just how much can he really hold on to? How long until he finally cracks wide open? Join us as we uncover the truth about Danny's life away from the spotlight. The legend of the Count. Danny the Count didn't come on the show as some ordinary mechanic navigating fame on reality television. He understood the chaos of publicity and reality shows so perfectly that he blended in seamlessly. But the legend of the great Count didn't start from the History Channel's Counting Cars reality show. Danny was born into the busy arms of Las Vegas, the showmanship, the casinos, the absolute craze about cars and rock music. That was the Vegas heritage, and he embraced it all. It molded him into the man that he became. But more than the bright lights of Viva Las Vegas and its fast-paced lifestyle, Danny also had the shadows of his father to contend with. His father was a multi-talented man with music at the center of his world. He was a pianist, composer, and producer who worked with legends of the game like Johnny Cash, Mahalia Jackson, and Connie Smith. And that's where it gets interesting for Danny. Growing up in the shadows of a man who stood that tall among the greats only meant one thing: pressure. The pressure to never let him down, and a drive to be even better than he ever was. So, at a young age, he picked up the guitar, and he learned to perform to a crowd. At 11 years old, he got the chance to perform on stage at Carnegie Hall in front of a large audience, and he shattered every expectation. And just like that, an entertainer was born. A few years later, he hosted a Vegas-based B-movie showcase called Saturday Fright at the Movies from 1990 to 2001, portraying a vampire biker character named Count Cool Rider. But he was much more than that, and he knew it too. Except for his addiction to Southern rock, blues rock, and hard rock, he had a silent obsession with something else. Something more mechanical, alive, purring, engines. Luckily, his father was just as good with a microphone as he was with an engine, and that's when everything changed. Danny learned to deal with cars. He built a garage of his own called the Count's Customs in the 80s, where gearheads came to have their cars and motorcycles converted from pure American muscle and European class to hot rods. After going more than a decade into the business, television fame came calling, with Pawn Stars Rick Harrison bringing him on the show as their automotive expert, and that's where it all began. He embraced fame like he had been waiting for it his whole life. With fans clamoring for him on the show at all times, the History Channel decided to give him a spin-off show from Pawn Stars, and Counting Cars was born. But where did it all start to crumble for the Count? A homage to living and dying. Everything changed for Danny in 2008, when he lost his father, Danny Koker Sr., the man who literally made him into what he became and kept the Koker name in the spotlight forever. According to sources really close to the bandana-wearing rainmaker, he was particularly disturbed by his father's demise. So, he made a silent vow to keep the Koker name in the spotlight no matter what it takes. And that's where things threatened to fall apart. He understood the sacrifices and how much he needed to put on the line if he would ever conquer the pressure to not only maintain the Koker name in the spotlight, but also expand it in ways his father never could. Although Danny Sr. kept the Koker name alive through music, the Count had a different idea. He wanted to rebuild the empire in a way that his father couldn't have. He had his own dreams, yet wanted to honor the dead. He was a man torn on the inside with decisions around him that could either stitch him back together or completely rip him to shreds. But while he contended with his decisions, counting cars was beginning to take over the American car customization niche, and he was at the center of it all. Slowly but surely, his dreams were aligning, and he was edging closer to keeping his father's name in the spotlight with his music. But how exactly was he going to blend both of these worlds so that one does not stop the other from a full manifestation? Sources close to him claimed that he pored day and night over that question, carefully planning his next step to not only blend those worlds, but be the best of both for himself and his father. Fans saw a man who had known success and finally found his place in the world. But away from the spotlight, he was looking to shed the weight of decisions that only he could make. But it did not take long until he figured out that perfect blend. He collapsed both worlds into one, using his rock band, Kount's 77, in events sponsored by his automotive custom repair shop, such as muscle cars at the Strip, at the Las Vegas Speedway. In other cases, he had actual crew members from his show, like Horny Mike, showing up at the band's performances, keeping the Koker family music heritage alive without his automotive world suffering the hit. But good things don't ever last long enough, do they? The cracks begin to appear. On screen, it seemed as though he had finally figured things out. The PR was loud, and fans were going crazy every time their favorite bandana-wearing menace grabbed a wrench and rolled out a design they had never seen. Every episode was unique, as he dealt with customers from different walks of life and satisfied them all the same way. From the very first season, he had the American automotive niche eating right out of his palm, and fans seemingly just couldn't get enough. Often, customers simply expected a casual mechanic who did his job and rolled out the car. But with Danny, it was different. He had an epiphany about the show as it went on. At first, he believed it was simply going to be about making bikes and customizing cars for the fans, and just about any client who walked in with an automotive need. However, he soon figured out that the cars and the motorcycles were only supporting casts. The main event was the people on screen. Their stories, their struggles, their wins, their losses, and more. But what he never really counted on was his own story being so out in the open, even when he tried to hide it. But how long can anyone really hide with the cameras rolling every time? But beneath all that charm, and the jovial discussion with Horny Mike, something was lurking in the dark, seemingly waiting to be let out. Fans noticed a shift in the atmosphere around the shop. Oh, the tension was so tangible you could cut it with a knife. Danny was no longer that funny rocker mechanic who juggled two different lives like it was nothing. It wasn't long before the pressure took its toll, and inside sources believed that he took it out on some of his closest workers, which didn't bode well for him. For context, familiar faces began to disappear, like Scott Jones, shop manager and Danny's bookkeeper, who kept the show running. Scott wasn't your regular manager. He had a whole sleeve of tattoos on his arm, was about 6'4", and he cracked the whip to get the workers pushing. He just didn't let anyone off the hook, and that enthusiasm, right there, is how he reeled the fans in. But somewhere between season 2 and 3, Scotty just disappeared. No big interview, no splash, no indirect jabs at Danny, just silence and absence. But it really is the silence that kills. Like a loaded gun, the silence was pointed directly at the heart of the show. And the panic began to spread beyond the screen. The questions in the media were the same. What is happening? Did Danny do something to tick off his best people? Who might be leaving next? Danny has been in the spotlight for a long time, especially since his 90s show, where he earned the Count moniker. So, he knew well how to deal with the noise around him. He drowned it in silence and kept the show running. But just how much can he really hold on until something breaks? The discovery that changed everything. Over the years, fans had asked the same questions repeatedly, but nothing seemed to ever happen. But while critics lurked waiting for some information to set the show alight, the unexpected happened. The show had gone on for 8 seasons before 2021. But for some reason, the viewership started to reduce, and creators needed a way to get back in the front of the American car restoration niche. At that point, they had 2 obvious options: stay for more seasons or just wrap it up. So, they gave it another shot, opting for their make-or-break season, Season 9. And what happened next caught everyone off guard. Although Danny had said no words to confirm it, the 9th season almost felt like a goodbye. The episodes had less drama compared to peak seasons like 1 and 3. Danny was more interested in the cars and the motorcycles, caring very little about what else was around them. Fans criticized as usual, but he made no comments. Something was wrong. The fans knew it. Critics knew it. But Danny hid so well beneath the King of Cool mirage that he had created for a long time. But it wasn't long before fans started pointing fingers. At first, no one thought much of it, but the voices just wouldn't go away. Critics alleged that somebody somewhere had stolen from the shop, and Danny wasn't particularly sure who it was. As usual, critics floated names across social media, tracing the problem back to an old name in the game, someone who had access to the books in a way that even Danny couldn't. And that name was Scott Jones. While there was no proof to fully suggest that he played any part in it, the rumors weren't going away. But could this Scott really have done that? Fans know Scott wasn't the softest-spoken man on the show, and he also had an in-your-face attitude to back it all up. However, he was considered by most fans to be morally upright. As expected, the unexplained decision to leave the franchise after the 2nd season was just about enough to fuel the rumors and have the internet talking. Like always, Scott kept his cool, not commenting on the allegations. However, in 2020, an insider revealed that Scott left the show because he wanted out of Las Vegas. But why would a man who just got introduced to television fame suddenly want to leave the fast-paced city life behind? According to a source close to the situation, the 56-year-old just wanted a good place to raise his son, and he didn't think that Las Vegas qualified for that. Does anyone really know better than a man who lived and worked in the city for that long? While some fans still didn't yield to the reports, qualifying it as speculation, Season 3, Episode 1 of the show, which was released on January 7, 2014, reflected that he actually did leave the franchise after the birth of his son. So, if Scott really didn't do it, who else was put in the line of fire? The million-dollar lie. When the stakes are high, sometimes no one sees clearly enough, and that was the case with Scott. Danny had been floating around in a system he had trusted for years, without ever really vetting the staff more than usual. He had known a large portion of his staff for many years, but this time, it wasn't enough to stop the perfectly developed system of corruption from going into overdrive. But the question remained, who exactly did it? Scott was the internet's scapegoat for obvious reasons. He disappeared without a trace, and to some, that was just enough. But after some really close inspection into the situation, Danny found out that he wasn't looking for one person. He was looking at a perfectly developed system of corruption that had been hidden inside his operations for quite a while and spearheaded by a former employee. However, he did not make it easy to be caught. He set up this scam so perfectly that Ryan Evans was caught in the crossfire as the culprit, who allegedly embezzled a lump sum of $75,000. Ryan had been painting cars long before he ever appeared on Counting Cars, and to Danny, he was more than just another worker in the shop or a cast member on the show. He was family. But when financial crimes come into the picture, no one is safe, and Ryan knew it too. According to sources close to the situation, Danny was torn between a sense of responsibility and a deeply rooted fear of what he might find if he dared to delve deeper into Ryan's involvement. However, investigators found no evidence tying Ryan to this scheme, and that's when he discovered a shocking truth. The spotlight shifted further back into the depths of the show that fans never saw. Danny had employed a man called Joseph Frontiera in 2013 on the recommendation of a staffing company called Randstand. Upon closer inspection, the investigators discovered that he actually had a criminal history of embezzlement and fraud. So the million-dollar question is, how does a franchise as big as Count's Customs be oblivious to an employee's history? Danny immediately filed a lawsuit against Joseph after discovering irregularities between his personal account and the company's account. It didn't take long before the depth of his corruption was exposed. The lawsuit claimed that he had been using the company's account to sponsor a luxury lifestyle, including buying a Range Rover and airplane tickets for personal trips. But Danny's lawsuit wasn't only going after Joseph, he went after Randstand too, the Delaware staffing agency that sent Joseph to him in 2013. He claimed that they had prior knowledge of his history as a fraud and chose to hide it from him and his firm, causing them serious financial implications in the process. However, winning a lawsuit never really just fixes the damage, does it? It never really brings back complete trust, does it? In 2021, the cameras stopped rolling, and for the first time in 10 years, Danny was edging away from the spotlight, drawing unanswered questions from fans and critics alike. Is there anything left of the empire that he did everything to protect? And what happens to Count's Customs now? A legacy paid in full. Talking about sacrifices, Danny paid his dues, and he paid in full. But the embezzlement scandal in the late 2010s and early 2020s threatens to unravel a legacy he built for decades. After the show ended, most fans wondered what was next for the Count. Would the custom shop keep running even after the show was canceled? Or is that done too? However, Danny wasn't the type to give up his legacy just because the camera stopped rolling. He had been working on cars long before the cameras came into the picture, and he wasn't planning to stop. But after leaving the spotlight, fans were curious about how many of the old crew remained with him, especially after the hellish torture on the shop in his quest to find the fraud. Although Ryan was deemed a suspect, there seemed to be no love lost between the two. Ryan remained as Count's Customs lead car painter even after the show ended. But even though he had been away from the spotlight, it would seem it wasn't done with him just yet. For context, there were several claims that he was in jail for selling CBD snake oils. But the question is, does Danny know he is in jail? Because the whole world seems to know that, but him. "It's fascinating what I have seen about myself," he began. "It is unbelievable, to be honest. I've seen this happen to huge-name people, and I get that. But it is kind of surprising that it happened to me," he said. He, in fact, name-dropped Clint Eastwood as one of the huge celebrities who had been slammed with a lawsuit for selling cannabidiol products. While Clint did win, Danny wasn't sure if he would survive a lawsuit of that magnitude. But beyond the cannabidiol allegations, Danny had continuously done well enough for himself away from the spotlight. While Counting Cars lost its spot in the spotlight, Danny knew better than to have all of his enterprises tied down to his fame. His image as the rock-loving, bandana-wearing menace kept the shop alive and gave him some more time to perform at the Count's vamped bar and grill, which he co-owned with his wife. But aside from the music, the hot rods, and the classic car conversions that pissed off purist gearheads, the real legacy revolved around family. And the Counting Cars family remains unbroken. For how long do you think Danny's legacy will continue to linger, even after the witch hunting for the fraud? Do you think the Count might ever bring Counting Cars back to television? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.